That afternoon, while I was out shopping, I happened to run into someone I knew. We sat down and started chatting for a while. She told me all kinds of things from her job, her personal life, and her salary and bonuses, to how her boss treated the employees at her company. I was listening pretty attentively, but as I listened, my mind started drifting, trying to figure out what I should say next. The more I thought about it, the more awkward I felt, and when she finally stopped and turned to look at me, I suddenly had no idea what to say. I understood everything she had just shared. I really did care, but in the end, all I could do was give a weak smile and try to laugh it off. Later, I realized that this kind of situation happens to a lot of people, not just me. A lot of people find themselves stuck in that same feeling, unsure of what to say, unsure of what story to tell, even though their minds are not completely blank. And that is exactly why I wanted to make this video, to share with you some very specific and easy-to-use techniques that can help you feel more confident, more comfortable, and never afraid of running out of things to say in a conversation. Number 1. Start with active listening instead of planning what to say next. Let's go back to the story I just shared. It clearly shows one thing. When you run out of things to say, it is often not because you lack communication skills. It is because, while the other person was talking, you were not really listening. You heard them with your ears, but your mind was busy managing how you appeared in the conversation. Your brain was trying to follow the story while also figuring out what to say and whether it would sound okay. When it was finally your turn to respond, your system got overloaded, and as a result, your mind went blank. Active listening means you slow down and truly follow the other person's story. When you do that, your attention stays with every detail they are sharing, instead of racing ahead to come up with a reply. That way, your response naturally comes from what you just heard. There is no need to plan or script it in advance. From a communication psychology standpoint, active listening helps reduce what is called over-self-monitoring, that constant feeling of watching how you come across to others. When this self-monitoring decreases, your brain has more room to process information and respond more naturally. That is why so many people speak fluently with close friends but freeze up in small talk with strangers, because with friends, they are not constantly judging themselves. If you want to almost never run out of things to say, the first step is learning how to truly listen. When you really listen, you do not have to work hard to keep the conversation going. It keeps itself going. Number 2. Ask open-ended questions to keep the other person talking. But to make sure the flow of conversation does not break halfway through, you need to ask questions that give the other person room to keep talking. Here is a simple example. In a group conversation, someone mentions that they just quit their job because there were too many changes and the pressure was overwhelming. If everyone just stays silent or nods, the conversation usually dies right there. But you can jump in with a simple question like, "What part of the job stressed you out the most?" Or, "When did you start thinking about quitting?" A single question that sticks closely to what they just said gives them a reason to keep going, and the conversation picks up again. This technique works so well because it hits right at a moment of hesitation. After someone shares something, they usually pause, waiting for a reaction, especially in group settings. If there is no clear signal, they tend to stop talking to avoid seeming like they are oversharing. A question that connects directly to what they just said acts as that signal. It shows that their story is still being followed and that there is interest. They do not have to wonder if they should continue, because your question gives them direction. It becomes easier for them to go deeper into their experience. Specific questions also help keep the rhythm of a conversation. As they respond, the conversation gets filled with more details, and those details become anchors that others can grab onto and join in. This helps the discussion evolve naturally and prevents awkward silences. For the person asking the question, the biggest benefit is that you no longer feel pressure to come up with new topics. You are just following the thread of what you heard and extending it one step further. When you can do that, the conversation flows naturally, and that "I don't know what to say" feeling shows up far less. Number 3. Use the spokes technique to avoid getting stuck. Once you know how to ask open-ended questions, the conversation starts to open up. At that point, the key is making sure it does not get too scattered. When the other person starts jumping from one topic to another, it is easy for the conversation to lose depth or direction. That is when you need to stick with a spoke of the topic instead of trying to follow every branch. Picture this. At a dinner with friends, someone starts saying that work has been really exhausting lately. A few sentences in, they switch to complaining about their boss, then mention how their company always changes plans at the last minute. Each topic gets a few lines before moving on, and you are left unsure where to jump in. In this case, you do not need to follow every detail. Just pick one like the company constantly changing plans and ask a follow-up question about that. When the conversation narrows to something specific, the other person tends to speak with more clarity and detail. The conversation becomes easier to follow and has more depth. Choosing one detail to focus on solves the overwhelm. When you zoom in and ask more about that one thing, you are giving both of you a clear path to continue. The other person knows what you are interested in, so they do not need to guess what to say next. They just continue along the line you opened. This helps the conversation stay grounded. The speaker now dives deeper into a real experience. Instead of skimming the surface of several, that depth makes the talk richer and more engaging. And for you, it makes things easier. You do not need to memorize everything they said. Just latch onto one point and stay with it. Every answer they give leads to another natural question or response from you. No need to invent something new to say. In short, when a conversation starts to wander, what you need to do is choose one topic and dive deeper into it. That keeps things clear, engaging, and flowing naturally. Number 4. Use your surroundings when the conversation slows down. Even if you have been doing everything right, conversations sometimes slow down. When the topic runs out or both people go quiet, trying to force something often makes it awkward. In moments like these, you can rely on what is happening around you to gently restart the conversation. Instead of sticking to an old topic, shift your attention outward. Maybe a dish just arrived at the table. You might casually mention that it seems saltier than last time, or joke that it tastes different today. A simple everyday comment like that can break the silence. From there, the talk naturally flows into food, daily routines, or something light. This approach works because it lets your brain shift modes. Deep conversations require your brain to constantly process emotions, thoughts, and other people's feelings. It drains energy. When that energy runs low, your mind feels empty. But that emptiness is not a sign that you are out of ideas. It just means your brain needs a reset. Focusing on your immediate surroundings gives your mind something easy to grab onto. There is no need to search for clever ideas because the context is already there. A simple observation buys your brain time to adjust while keeping the conversation moving. This trick also helps lighten the mood. After an intense topic, switching to something mundane helps both of you relax. With less pressure to think of the right thing, the other person becomes more responsive, and the interaction feels easier. That comfort creates space for the conversation to pick up again. The key is that this transition feels natural. You are not cutting off the conversation. You are shifting it into a calmer lane to regain rhythm. Once the flow is back, you can steer it in a new direction without it feeling forced. When your brain slows down, you need a simple anchor to reset. Your surroundings are that anchor. Once you get used to this approach, silences become useful cues, not dead ends. Number 5. Share about yourself in a thoughtful, controlled way. Communication cannot be a one-way street, and a real conversation cannot revolve only around listening and asking questions. If you only take on the role of the question asker without sharing anything about yourself, the talk can easily become dry and lack emotional connection. To help the other person feel more at ease opening up, you need to weave in short, well-timed personal shares, just enough and at the right moment. For example, a friend tells you they are feeling really drained because their job keeps changing. As they vent about how the company constantly shifts plans, you could briefly say that you once worked at a place like that too. At first, it felt pretty overwhelming, but over time you got used to it and things became more manageable. And then let them continue with their story. When you do not interrupt their flow like that, they are more likely to keep talking. In fact, their tone often softens, and the conversation naturally shifts into something that feels like two people talking about a shared experience, instead of one person venting while the other just listens. The reason this approach works so well has to do with your role in the conversation. When you share a short, relevant, personal experience, you step out of the role of just asking and become a part of the story. The other person feels that you truly understand not just because you are being nice, but because you have been there. And that creates a sense of emotional safety, which encourages them to open up even more. The key to this kind of sharing lies in how much you say. When your story is short and stops at the right time just enough to show a connection, the control of the conversation still stays with them. The flow stays natural, and the focus does not shift away from their story. When you share in this way, the conversation tends to go deeper without feeling heavy. The other person feels like they are being heard by someone who gets it, not someone sitting in silence. That feeling of someone else has been through this too makes them speak more slowly, more clearly, and more honestly. The exchange becomes a true connection, not just a back and forth of words. Once the rhythm of the conversation feels steady, it naturally leads into the next topic. You no longer need to calculate your next question in your head, because what they just shared already points the way forward. At that point, the conversation becomes easier, more fluid, and much more comfortable for both people. Number 6. End the conversation clearly and on a positive note. When a conversation has run deep and both people feel connected, ending it at the right moment helps preserve that good feeling. A clean ending leaves both sides with a positive impression. So, it is definitely worth knowing how to end a conversation clearly and warmly. You might say something like, "I really enjoyed talking with you. Thanks so much for sharing. I actually have to go take care of something now, but let's catch up again sometime soon. I would love to hear more." When a conversation ends this way, the other person feels a lot more at ease. They know exactly why it is ending and do not have to wonder whether they talked too much or said something wrong. The brain has a clear explanation, so it stops overthinking and avoids self-blame. By saying thank you and giving a reason for leaving, you help the other person's emotions land in a good place. They walk away remembering the chat as something positive, not something cut off mid-sentence. And when you mention getting together again, the sense of connection lingers, making the goodbye feel light and natural. Psychologically, this is what helps the conversation feel complete. The other person leaves feeling respected, and you leave without any guilt or awkwardness. That final emotional note is what people remember the most, and it shapes how they see the whole interaction. So ending things clearly and kindly not only helps wrap up the conversation, it also makes sure both sides walk away feeling light, understood, and positively connected. At this point, you can probably see that running out of things to say rarely comes from a lack of intelligence or poor communication skills. Most of the time, it happens because you are too focused on saying the right thing or sounding impressive, and you forget that a conversation is really just a flow between two human beings. When you know how to truly listen, ask the right questions, shift topics naturally, make use of your surroundings, share just enough about yourself, and end the conversation clearly, the pressure of, "What do I say next?" naturally begins to fade. The conversation no longer feels like a test. It becomes a pleasant experience for both sides. More importantly, you do not need to be the most talkative person in the room, or someone who is always entertaining. You just need to be someone who is genuinely present in the conversation, someone who pays attention, knows when to pause, and respects the other person's emotions. Once you can do that, you will realize that you rarely fall into that blank space, and even if you do, it does not feel so scary anymore. Communication is not about trying to impress. It is about creating a sense of safety, where both people feel free to be themselves. And when that feeling is there, the conversation will always have somewhere to go.